day is it for you guys? It's still August 2nd, 2016. So all the classes have now gone up. I guess the last class about low temperature glazes went up at midnight, so some of you may not have seen it. I know that class content's been coming fast and furious the last 2 weeks, so there might be a lot of questions, or it might not. I mean, a lot of what we've sort of going through at this point is sort of straightforward. Obviously, colors always have a relative notion of mystery. But, you know, I think that the interesting thing is, especially if you have gone through the low temperature discussion today, that even with that, there's really not a lot of sort of magic and mystery, that the colors are still exceptionally consistent. You know, that whole copper blue thing. Yeah, there are cool tricks like when you overload with copper and it goes purple and all that. You know, a lot of those effects are not what we would call food safe. They're not well tested. They're also not well researched. You know, would that work of putting 8% cobalt or 8% copper in a glaze at cone 10? I don't know. People don't do it because it's considered too much loading. So theoretically, it should work. A lot of the chemistry that we have says that color is consistent, just like chemistry is consistent. So we have a lot of that. We also have had some of the discussions on the special effects, which we haven't had a chance to talk about with us. So, you know, whatever questions you guys have, as per normal, dive in.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Okay, I'll start. Okay, so I'm just wondering why do some colors disappear? Like maybe a temperature thing? Like,
it's a glass thing and a volatility
okay.
thing. Sometimes the glass will just tear the colorants apart, and they'll literally be consumed by the glass, because that glass is still this very powerful medium that we're working with. Some colorants are more robust than others. Sometimes they disappear, sometimes they don't. You know, a lot of the time when we see that, often it's a glaze with very low colorant loading, and it'll just be an application where you don't see it, or a clay body where you don't see it. So sometimes that happens. Some materials do get eaten. They absolutely do, and this goes back to the zinc problem that we started to talk about, especially with stains, but with zinc colors in general. That something about those zinc processes, that it will not allow the color to develop. And I think I state in the lecture that I don't know what it is about zinc, and I haven't found anything in the literature that declares exactly why zinc does this, but it's known to be brutal. And if you look at the stain charts, they'll often say not compatible with zinc. So,
Okay.
but yeah, a lot of the time it's just literally the glass is just stronger than the colorant, and the colorant can't find purchase in the molecular structure.
Yeah, I'm noticing mostly with underglazes and just with. So I was wondering if it was something to do with the clear glaze that I'm putting on top, or if it's just the stains that are in the underglaze, because some colors burn out and others don't.
Yeah, well, it's generally colorant dependent. So it's whatever the colorants are in that stain, or if it's specifically stains and underglazes, it depends on the structure of that, as we talked about, that there's different structures to the stains. Some of them are very stable and generally, but some colors just do not have stability. You know, reds become very sensitive, yellows become very sensitive, and it's because as the structure of the molecule that makes up that stain can get eaten by the glass, and it's not eaten, it's just torn apart and not allowed to find purchase in the molecular structure.
Okay.
Because remember, we need those bonds between the glass and the transition metals to get color.
Right.
Unless it's a totally inert stain, which I think is sort of a misnomer.
Okay. Okay. I have a few questions. Should I just go?
Sure.
Okay. So I was just wondering, like, why some clear glazes turn brown clay gray.
It's not that they don't turn brown clay gray. It's that clay is not allowed to oxidize. Okay,
Oh,
so
okay.
a lot of time with, say, stonewares. Generally, you'll get some form of reduction on the outside of stonewares because it will naturally reduce. But
Oh,
generally, when you put a clear glaze over it, there's no ability for reduction to happen on that body glaze interface. And so it'll appear more hazy gray instead of having a brown tinge to it, which a stoneware normally would. And that's because of the presence of the iron that reduces to some degree naturally in the firing.
okay. So it's not a matter of one clear versus another? Does that generally happen?
I haven't found a lot of clears that allow the body to um, reduce. Do you have examples of that? Because I haven't seen that. It's pretty much a firm barrier.
It's just at my work, people use the red clay, it's red stoneware, and then they put clear glaze on it, thinking it's gonna stay
Right,
brown or red, and it turns gray.
right.
So they complain to me, and I don't have the answer for them. So
Yeah, it's just about those reduction processes because yeah, that the red will turn to black iron naturally over cone 4 or 5, in that area. And then sometimes it can switch back and sometimes it doesn't. If the glaze is pretty viscous, then generally it'll just stay in whatever state it was when it broke down.
okay, okay. And then another question I had. Um, So I wrote down, will there always be enough unbound oxygen to bond with the metals?
Hmm. It's a good question. Yes, there will.
Okay. Okay.
Because our glazes are 60 to 90% silica, and those are the bonds that we're talking about subbing in. And
Right.
because silicon dioxide, aluminum, dialuminum trioxide is alumina, and then R2O and RO, there are all sorts of oxygens in there that are left to be bonded to. And since our colorants are generally a very small percentage of the glaze, yes, there should always be enough oxygens. Now we could
Oh,
go back to this theoretical, like, glaze with 8% copper. Um, is that theoretically having too much copper to bond? We'd have to run very powerful calculations to figure out the number of bonds and the number of of atoms of copper to fill that in. Um, I can't say. What that does to glaze durability, again, that we have to make that consideration. As we discussed with last week, when we're considering iron, when do we have to sort of convert a large percentage into an RO flux to consider it? We would have to ask the same question about all of our fluxes. We just don't know how they apply from a UMF perspective, and those that are alkaline versus acidic do inherently have, at some point, some valid consideration where they would fall into on UMF, but we don't know where those are at this point.
okay. And my well, I made an observation in my experimenting that when the amount of boron compared to the silica and alumina levels is high, then the glaze is white rather than clear. So does that mean boron? Like, have you noticed that?
How do you define by the boron level being high?
Well, so I've been doing, I don't know, I've done like 50 different tests trying to fix crazing.
Mhm.
And so the pattern that I'm seeing is like um, either as I keep the boron the same and decrease silica and alumina, then the glaze turns whiter and whiter. Or if I keep the silica and alumina the same and I increase boron, then it goes from being really clear to like a milky white color.
Hmm. I don't have an answer to that. If you can document any of that and post the numbers, I'd need to see more to sort of speculate as to what's going on.
Okay,
Um,
it'll be in my lab.
yeah, that's an interesting question. No, I don't have an answer to that off the top of my head.
Okay. And I think those are all my questions.
All right. Phyllis, Abby?
So some of the glazes at OCAC, where you might be spending some time next March, are indicated to be cone 6 and cone 10, but the glazes that are marked 6 can work at 10.
Mm-hmm.
So if a glaze has a wide range, and you want to think about a glaze maturing,
Mm-hmm.
then how is it that it can work at both? Wouldn't it be immature actually at 6 and underfired if it will go all the way to 10?
Well, you're relying on the assumption of whoever published this glaze or put it into circulation, that their assumption of it being mature at either of those temperatures, right? And that's one of the problems that we have with definition is people can put whatever definition they want on things, and it just is. So can a glaze have a 4-cone range? Yeah, absolutely. Now theoretically, that glaze I would like to see mature at cone 10 and running at cone 6. But oftentimes people will classify things that are under fired to a certain degree as a quality glaze. I'm generally not in agreement with that, but it certainly does happen. But could one glaze have a range of that far? Yeah, it can happen. Generally, you need to have fairly low silicon alumina levels or not exceptionally high boron levels. But again, it depends on the variable chemistry of each individual glaze, so it's sort of a case-by-case situation. But it's that same thing. To me, a mature glaze should have basically the same texture if you fire it a cone hotter. If a 1-cone variation is dictated to affect texture or appearance, then the lower cone is not mature, right? Mm-hmm. That you should always be able to fire at least a cone hotter and get the same basic exposure. There's nothing in chemistry except for incomplete reactions to make a 1-cone rise radically different. Maybe a little bit more running, but other than that, they should be very close to the same. So again, but it'd be a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Okay, and I think it was in Glazes 1 you described wood firing as neutral. Is that simply because there's constant combustion of the wood going on and some use of oxygen?
Right. And it's constantly cycling, right? Whenever you dump wood in there, it's using the oxygen actually to combust the wood, and that can actually make the chamber more neutral. And then once that leaves, it will actually then reduce into the chamber, and it just keeps cycling back. Every time you stoke, you're just changing the oxidation relationship in the kiln, which makes it inherently neutral. Some people will try to fire a more reduced kiln, but we come into fuel consumption issues, and this happens in reduction kilns at high temperature anyway, where you push it into reduction at cone 5, 6, 7, and then the kiln stalls. And it stalls very simply because at that point you're trying to induce a combustion reaction, right? You need oxygen and fuel and a heat source to generate heat. Well, if you starve the kiln of oxygen, you're shutting off that fuel source, and so the kiln stops generating heat and sort of stalls. And the same thing can happen in a wood kiln by trying to push too far, especially considering so much of the carbon is dirty that you're getting out of the firing once it's released. And then you're trying to use that released carbon to create a reduction. So again, it's that difference between the stoke and the burning, and the stoke and the burning, and the stoke and the burning. So yeah, it's fairly neutral. Something leaning towards reduction, but more neutral.
And when you were describing your barium nickel glaze that had a really short shelf life, does that apply just to that combination of barium nickel, or to all nickel glazes? Mix them and use them? Or
I've only seen it on the barium nickel. I've heard tell of only being barium and nickel. But again, I haven't experimented enough. But I have other nickel glazes that are fairly stable. again, it's one of those anomalies. I can't find much in literature, but yeah, that there's something in that reaction that just, yeah, it's really infuriating. Right up there with my yellow problems as to trying to find stability. Is some nice, some of the nickel strontium glazes are nice, but they're not the same purple as the barium ones.
Are they more stable?
Yes. Actually, I can't make a comment on that. I actually don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Again, worth looking into.
And did you put, I haven't looked at the website recently, did you put Tom's paper on there yet?
I think it was course documents.
And does it have a chart of all those reds he created?
Yeah, all those reds are directly from his paper.
Because I tried an oxblood recently and it was ugh.
What was so ugh?
It just was dull and dreary red.
Yeah, that's a lot of the case of, it's not really spectacular. As I discussed, copper reds need a lot of tweaking and a lot of maturity. I had some students 2 years ago who were really trying to figure out the strontium barium thing, but I think I've mentioned before, we have this major strontium issue in Alfred that no one can figure out, and no one is putting much effort into figuring out.
It's inconsistent, or it's dead?
Dead. Our strontium has not worked for years now, and it's really frustrating.
Well, combine it with the nickel and revive it.
Right. Okay, hold on. Let me look for Tom's paper here. Lawrence Lamb. Okay, here, I will post it as we speak. If I can find it on this computer. Browse my computer. Yeah, Tom's research. Tom is a great guy. He's I think I mentioned that he now works for the Smithsonian in their research department. Really fascinating guy. Really just one of those sweetest pie people. But does great research. Literature. There we go. And this is just his undergraduate thesis. Okay. Should be up as soon as it takes time to get it over the ocean.
Okay. Can you, based on the numbers, just predict how runny a glaze is going to be?
No. It depends on
Hello?
Hello? Kevin?
That works.
Hi, Kevin. Welcome.
Hey.
Nice to hear you.
Yeah, right? Nice to hear you.
Thanks. So with the runniness, no, I mean, as you lower your inherent silicon alumina levels, the runniness is going to increase. Or conversely, as you increase your temperature. Are you trying to figure out a way to develop a predictive skill for runniness?
Well, if I were 40 years younger, maybe. At this point, at this point, there's a lot of things that, okay, that's interesting, but doesn't change my life.
Yeah, it's one of those things of, look at the glaze. It's sort of a lot of, what the skills that you have are looking at something that is occurring and figuring out how to fix it. So
right.
Somebody comes to you with a glaze that's running, fire it slightly cold or move to increase silicon alumina, I don't know, polyalumina by 0.05, 0.1, somewhere in that neighborhood, and silicon correspondingly.
So if the silica to alumina ratio is low, as in a matte glaze, then you're more likely to get runnies?
It will, yeah, with very low silicon alumina in a matte, they will actually be slightly runnier than an equivalent gloss, because the silicon alumina has also been extracted from the glass base into the crystals, and so the inherent glass base left underneath has an even lower silicon alumina level, and that makes it run more.
Okay. Well,
Which is part of why people like break, because that's one way to induce break.
Oh, okay. Well, part of it kind of came about when I mixed up a glaze that was called Rusty Bronze, which this past week in reading the little Cone 6 book that you think is okay, the Michael somebody book. By God, I mean, I came across the formula online, and there it was in the book, because I happened to really like it, and now I know it's phase separation. But when I made it up initially, it did some interesting things. The first time I used it, it was great. The next time it bubbled, cratered a little bit. And then when I substituted copper for iron, I then called it slip and slide green, because it just sort of zipped off the pot.
Yeah.
So even if you're playing with your silica alumina ratios, how big a role is the transition metal going to play in it then?
Copper is definitely the great offender. Copper tends to flux things to an effect, and especially you bring down into lower silicon alumina levels, and it does make it even fluxier, as it were. Again, this goes into the discussion if copper should be considered as a flux, or how we would go about considering that. But yeah, I mean, tweak it just a little bit, bring up the silicon alumina, bring down the boron. You could do that as well. Minor tweaks would bring it into line.
Okay. Well, I was intrigued to see that he called it a fussy glaze, because that was my impression of it after I love it, but I'm not sure quite yet how to deal with it to have a higher success rate.
I'm more intrigued by the fact that you said that it was different batched one time to another.
You mean from using the iron to using the copper?
Well, you said just the first time you batched it was okay, and the second time it was not okay.
Oh no, it was the same batch. I was just running some tests on it.
Oh.
I often use my pieces as tests. It doesn't matter. And
everything's best.
Yeah, I mean, it was just everything I like about a glaze, to have a variation in surface and minor variations in color and things, and it makes it feel more like an abstract painting than just paint. But I was just astonished. And the other thing that glaze did, which none of my other glazes do, because they're all out in the garage so they don't get heated, is it actually precipitated crystals. And we don't have cold winters here, I mean, relative to where you are.
Right.
But it actually crystallized out.
Well, everything is inherently soluble.
Right.
The feldspars are soluble. There's going to be sodium and potassium inside. The kaolins and clays. Actually, for the most part, the calcium alkaline earths are not particularly soluble. They're pretty stable chemically in water. They're generally called lightly soluble or fairly insoluble. But yeah, I mean, if there's a sodium or a lithium or a potassium in there, even in a frit, and we've been having some interesting discussions about solubilities in frits, because we've seen some weird behavior. Some frits, like 3110, should be fairly soluble, while others, like 3124, should be pretty stable. We've seen some reactions in some clay bodies recently with some friends that are working with, where the 3110 is coming across as stable and the 3124 is coming across as unstable, and really not sure why we're getting that reaction. But yeah, I mean, anything can do that, the longer it sits especially. Remember, that goes back to the whole kaolinization of clay problem. feldspar will turn into clay. That sodium or even potassium will slough off eventually. Water, and actually being room temperature water will probably make it actually a little bit worse, as far as the ability to dissolve that material.
Is it like barium nickel then? It's no longer useful? Because, I mean, I just brought it in the house, let it warm up, and the crystals disappeared.
Yeah, they're now soluble, so again, we get that whole transition of into the body and then precipitate on the surface during drying. You'll get a lot more break, you'll get a lot more variation that way, because the crystals will precipitate on edges and protrusions. It's not usable. That's something we haven't really looked at, of to see how, say, solubility of glaze materials affects localized chemistry, affects durability. It just hasn't been researched, because generally we try to avoid solubility if we can. So it would certainly be an interesting study to do, because we know high R2O causes instability. So if you're getting regions of high R2O because of solubility of lithium, sodium, or potassium, theoretically you should have low durability regionally. Fascinating question. Absolutely no answers for it out there.
So I'm sorry, say it once more. There was a minor distraction outside.
Okay.
The high R2O causes what again?
Causes instability.
Instability.
Right. That's pretty well proven. Again, that whole thing about the flux ratio being independent of temperature.
Okay.
Right? We know this, of that high R2O always causes glaze degradation. That's the number one cause. Under firing, excessive colorants, those can also be an effect. High RO can also have an effect, but for the most part, high R2O is what causes instability in our glazes.
Okay. And just explain again what you use the word flashing the kiln, and I've heard that before, but tell me what that means. It's like striking the kiln or striking the. It's like, okay, these are interesting words. What do they really mean?
Just the term flashing?
Flashing, you use the phrase flashing the kiln. Or at least that's what I heard. And then sometimes they talk about striking. I've read that. What does that mean?
I don't know if I would have used the phrase flashing the kiln.
Flashing oxidation at the end.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So yes, that is certainly something where, they will oxidize at the end of the firing. It actually forces a little bit more reduction to take place, and will tend to brighten up colors. So most serious reduction fires will do that, where the last 5 minutes where they've been reducing, they'll actually open up the kiln, pull it out of reduction and let it fire an oxidation for a minute.
Literally open the door?
No. Just open the chimney.
Okay, I had a great vision.
That's a crystal.
Wow.
That does happen.
Well, I thought it would be fantastic to have NASA space shuttle windows.
Oh yeah, I've done that many times. I've
Have
opened
you?
many kilns at high temperatures. Oh yeah. I've poured plenty of glass in my day, so. But no, you just open up the chimney, so you pull it out of the reduction and open up the burner so that they get a lot of oxygen.
Okay, yeah, okay. All right, well, I do that. I just didn't know that it had a name.
Hey, Matt, do you have any enamelers that you like that I should look up?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you. I was at the Louvre yesterday, and there's some goddamn good enamels.
I was just researching French.
Yeah, I'm standing there talking with my wife, going, yeah, I really need to look into enamels, because it's something that, here's where I stab you in the heart, no one does in ceramics anymore that I know of. It is just a skill that has completely been abandoned, and the color range that they were able to achieve was astounding. And there are some people that China paint. You could get into a debate about China paint versus enameling, but no, I don't know a single person that's enameling on ceramics anymore.
Yeah, there's a book here in front of me that says it comes back about every 20 years in like all materials. It like has like this wave effect of artists that are interested in it.
Yeah, that certainly happens. A lot of process-oriented systems have that, where people sort of there's a wave of people thinking that it's inauthentic or that it's not, natural the way people should be working with materials, and then they go and they abandon it, and then people go, oh, I hate all this natural stuff, and they'll figure out the process stuff, and then they'll come back. That definitely happens. Yeah, but
I was reading all about the Ceramic National show that happens in Cleveland every year.
Mm-mm.
No, that doesn't happen anymore.
Oh, well, there's generally the NSECA National, but yeah, I don't pay attention to a lot of the annual shows, so
Okay.
I just don't know.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense because all the books that are in front of me have a lot about enameling on metal and enameling on glass, but there's only one book that is actually Chinese-based book that says that talks about ceramic enameling. So.
Yeah, and I mean, the main reason not to do it is the toxicity issues. Generally, you're working at pretty low temperatures, so the toxicity can be a little risky. But yeah, I mean, the colors are astounding. And it all goes back to that history question of the ability to create certain colors with limited technology. That they couldn't get higher temperatures, so they did what they could at lower temperatures and different processes, aside from the normal pot and glaze situation as we generally have.
All right. I was wondering if, well, I mean, since you said there's not much information about it, the temperatures that I'm reading about are pretty high, from like 1360 to 1420. And they go all the way to... Huh?
Is that F or C?
F.
Okay, so that's pretty low for us, actually.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That's super low for ceramics.
Okay. Haha. Never mind.
Let me see. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull a cone on that. What did you say it was?
1420 to 1510 is the highest I have for enamels.
1510. 1510 is 821C, and I think that's beneath the cone temperatures. I don't even have to look it up.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, that's the whole thing of that goes back to why they work, because they are really low temperature and the colors are really bold, but with very glossy surfaces. So I'm pretty sure that's well beneath cones, but I'm trying to pull up a cone chart here. Cone C. I'm sorry, excuse me. No, actually, we're in there. What did I say it was? 821. So that's cone 015. So that's still temperatures.
That's still very low.
Yeah.
All right.
Anybody else?
You just said the feldspars and whatnot, everything's water soluble. Is it just less water soluble than the lithium carb or sodium?
Lithium carb is just straight up, you put it in the water and it goes away. Just sugar and water. Just 100%, well, not 100, well, 100% soluble. Yeah, with the sodium or the potassium feldspars, or nepheline cyanide, or even the Fritz, it's less soluble, but we come into this question of this ion exchange again. That water, H2O, is inherently an alkaline metal, and so it will ion exchange its way into the system, and then the sodium and potassium, that they just go floating away.
Okay. And then, is there any reason to use or not use like Fritz over feldspars? Like, do you have a like when you're looking at a UMF and trying to create a recipe to is there any reason why you would choose one or over the other?
I mean, I love Fritz, and the number one, we discussed this before, but people say, oh, this Frit doesn't work at this temperature, don't use this. Don't look at any of that. Just look at how it applies to the chemistry of the glaze, and the Frit will work. The problem with Fritz is that they are so chemically specific, it becomes very hard to substitute them into an existing formula. Because 3124 is a full glaze on its own, so you can't take anything out of that composition. You can only add to it. So what are you going to add to it to move things down? And then it becomes very tricky because you automatically can't add a feldspar to 3124. Okay, because a feldspar will just bring up your alkali metals, right, with the sodium, but it'll also bring up your silica and alumina. So you're going from wherever you are installed just up. And it's just, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do you any good chemically. Now, there are certain Frits that you can do things with. This goes back to the 3110 problem. 3110 is very high alkali metal and very low alumina. Now, this works great for the crystalline glazers because they add in alkali earth in the form of zinc, and the zinc doesn't have any silicon alumina attached, so that's great. It allows them to move that, to change the formula from a UMF standpoint without adding silicon alumina, and also it also has inherently low alumina, which, as we've talked about, you have to keep your alumina levels relatively low to get the glaze to crystallize as willemite instead of the gonite.
So, but say I'm trying to like introduce boron into a glaze that doesn't have boron. Would you use a Frit over Gersley borate, or vice versa, or like would they give different results, or is it just like how it is in the bucket, or?
The real magic of Gersley borate is that the super easy answer to convert a glaze to cone 6 is that you take a cone 10 glaze and you add about 10% Gersley borate.
Right.
It generally kind of works. It brings in the requisite amount of boron without altering your fluxes too much, because ulixite and culminite bring in sodium and calcium, and there you go. Now, Gersley borate's inconsistent chemically, and then there's the two different melting temperatures, which might be a problem. But generally, I found, and I talked about this, I think, in the last lecture, that for all the credit that's given to Gersley borate for being weird, I really think it's just like reduction in raku glaze is actually the weird part, and people just like give the credit to Gersley borate. Because I've made plenty of just boring ass glazes that use Gersley borate as their source. And it works really well actually for recreating Stull, is using Gersley as your boron source, because you don't have in all the extra silicon alumina that you don't want to deal with. So that's the easy answer. Now, some people working at cone 6 will tend to use 3134 because 3124 is the perfect O4 glaze. 3134 tends to be about cone 456, somewhere in that range. It's about 0.3 boron via UMF. Again, 0.3 to 0.7, set silicon alumina level, all that. But again, bringing it in becomes complicated because, it's a sodium-calcium system. So maybe you wanted barium. Well, you can't bring in barium if you're already getting calcium in the form of your Frit. The ultimate Frit out there, or the ultimate boron source that my particular favorite is CaddyCal, which is just straight calcium borate. There's been some synthetic ones, but I know it's not manufactured in the States. And I mentioned through the course that there's this, oh man, I should go to Ceramic Supply Store while I'm here. There's this Frit only available in Europe. That's a Johnson Matthey 3221F. But it's not available anywhere in North America that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah, but the calcium borate's great because there's no sodium, there's no silica, there's no alumina. Just boron and calcium. and it's not water soluble, but it's impossible to get. Caddy cow
Right.
is also not being processed anymore either. So, well, all my friends are dead. Any other questions?
Okay. Not for me.
No?
No.
No? Cool.
Sorry, what's the mechanism of action for Darvon again?
It's just affecting the charge of clay particles. Clays generally have a positive side and a negative side,
Mm-hmm.
and it turns all the negatives positive, so then it has a positive side and a positive side, and then the clay particles, they just repel each other. You know, two like sides repel,
Right.
and that's it. So it just changes the surface chemistry of the clay particles temporarily. Cool. Well, if you have any more questions, so I know we had discussed the fact of I'm more than willing to hold. I know I'm not exactly as clear as a bell right now. So if you guys want to have another hangout next week just to talk about stuff, we can. Like I said, your exam will go live. I think it should be there midnight East Coast time. It's another multiple choice. It should be pretty straightforward. I'm back on a plane on Saturday afternoon. I won't be getting home until Sunday afternoon. So please get any of your writing submitted by then, because I need grades in Monday morning. And like I said, yeah, I'm more than willing to have another hangout next week once you've thought about stuff, or I know some of you haven't gotten through like this last class content because of the rushed release schedule here at the end. Yeah. I think that's it. Any other questions for me?
Do you have is there any criteria for this written assignment, or is it just whatever?
Whatever.
Show you what we got. Okay.
Try to make full sentences. No emojis in your text, okay?
So can I, I'm new to PowerPoint, so can I send you a PowerPoint file and then you can just read my notes that are in there?
Yeah,
Does that
be aware
work?
I'm going to steal it for class content, but I'll credit you respectively.
Okay. I'll watermark all my images.
There you go.
So, I have a bunch of content on where it came from and why and what years and all that and who did it. And I also have a bunch of stuff on process. Do you want both of those, or would you rather have the history?
Actually, I'd like more of process parts, but definitely include both.
Okay, I can definitely get more process as well. Excellent.
Cool.
Cheers.
Cheers. Alrighty, folks. Well, you all have evenings left to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, God, wait. It's not even 6 o'clock for Phyllis and Sue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Post.
Yeah.
It's beautiful night.
It's the middle of the night here. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right, I'm gonna go to bed.
Okay.
If you want, we can chat next week.
Okay.
I'm down.
Enjoy your weekend.
Hey, thanks.
Bye,
Thank
y'all.
you. Good night.